Good. So basically the way this is going to work is I would like to do a little bit more informal of a presentation. So I'm going to give you guys about 6 or 7 lessons or my kind of core product management principles. And then at the end, if you guys have questions, you want to talk about anything, give more examples that you can think of, I'd love to hear what you have to say. So basically, in my opinion, ideas are chaos. Absolute chaos. You come up with an idea and trying to figure out what to do with that idea is a massive challenge and is really the core goal of any startup. Is how do you take an idea, grapple with all the multifaceted elements of that idea, and turn it into order. Turn it into a true working product that people are going to use and that they're going to love. And the format, the way I'm going to do this is kind of run you through a lesson. Then I'm going to talk about a real world example that I've seen of that lesson. And from there, we're going to go into an example that relates to my business. So I'm a CEO and product manager of a company called WeVue. We have an app that lets people crowdsource pictures and videos around events. You can download it right now. It's on iPhone. If you enter the album code BCTPA, you guys can upload photos and videos there. But this is not going to be a pitch, just kind of telling you the lessons that I have learned. And our story is actually pretty interesting. I moved here from New York City to start this company about 2 years ago. We've gone through a lot of product iterations. And we're in the moment kind of starting to build a B2B application. So we're going from the B2C space and we're starting to think about, or the B2C space, starting to think about how to take the technology we've built and turn it into a product that can make us some money. So product management in my mind is a very multifaceted discipline. It involves a little bit of everything that technology has to offer. And while I hate using Steve Jobs quotes or examples, he really is the quintessential product manager. The guy couldn't write code, he couldn't do perfect pixel designs, but he was able to pull a team together and he had the wherewithal to build truly amazing products. And as much as I hate to use him as an example, he really is the perfect example. My background, again, quite multifaceted. I have a master's degree in English literature. I actually started working in startups when I was 19, kind of on and off while I was studying books. And then when I graduated from school, I had done a lot of theater production. It's kind of where I think product management and theatrical or film production are very similar. As the product manager, you're basically the producer for your company. You're the one that's pulling everything together and making sure the show happens. So from there, I went into big data, and that also applies to product management. You need to be able to have insights about how people are using your product. And what they're going to do with it. So on to the first lesson. Does anyone have any questions? All right. Paint a picture. Don't build a canvas, as Bob Ross would say. So basically what this means, in my opinion, is you need to start by building a minimum viable product instead of trying to build a platform. When you start with those ideas, that chaos, you're going to think you're going to build something that's going to do absolutely everything. We thought, hey, we're going to go to everything from weddings to, sporting events to the Super Bowl to, every concert you've ever imagined. And we're going to grab all these photos and videos and we're going to make this amazing app that does absolutely everything. And then we did that and it didn't work. And I think the reason it doesn't work is because you want to make a dartboard, but consumers want a dart. They want to know what your product does very specifically. They want to know that use case, especially if it holds true for mobile. People use mobile apps in very specific ways to perform very minute and specific functions. So the real world example I see of that today is what Facebook's really doing. So Facebook started out with a minimum viable product. Hey, let's basically put our faces into a digital book and we can check each other out. And they evolved from there and developed a very deep feature set. And it always amazes me if you go to Facebook on the desktop and think about learning how to use that again. There's so much going on there today that I really couldn't imagine kind of diving in and trying to learn how Facebook works as a non-techie. But now what's interesting, Facebook's going at the market with what they call a constellation approach. So instead of having one massive product, they're buying up companies and they're releasing very targeted applications. So WhatsApp, the messaging app, they paid $19 billion for that. So why did they do that? Because obviously their messaging app built into their product was not being used the same way that this highly targeted application was. You even see that they're releasing applications like that Slingshot app. It's, hey, I send you a picture and you send me one back. Very, very simple. So I think How that applies to us, again, we built a product, we thought it would do everything, and now we're really trying to focus on how we can take photo and video sharing and apply it to enterprise culture. So does anyone have any examples they can think of, something they want to share about the difference between a platform and a minimum viable product? Come on, I know you guys got something. Come on. All right. Does your front end know what your back end is doing? So I first saw this on a billboard for a company my dad was working for outside Philadelphia. I just thought it was an awesome image. And I was like 14. I had no idea what a front end or a back end was in a technical sense. But really the key in my mind to product management or project management is knowing what everyone in your company that's involved in the product are doing and making sure that they're having the appropriate conversations that need to happen, that they're all on the same page. You don't want your developers on the front end getting too far ahead of the guys on the back end, or you're going to have a funnel that's not going to be fun. I think too that there's a lot of elements to product management. There's user experience and user interface. Again, similar to front end and back end. Does the look of your application tell the story of your application? Does the front end code work with the back end code? Also, you need to know how to hire. You need to find the right people. You're not going to be able to do everything. So part of your job, and really the key element of product management, is making sure that you have the right people that can fill the gaps that you yourself can't handle. And in the startup, you're going to have to do some of the work. You're probably going to be a designer, you're probably going to be a developer, you might even be a sales and marketing person, but you really need to make sure that you can fill the gaps, similar to Steve Jobs, in your own skill set so that you have a really strong team that can execute. You're also going to have to get good at things like issue tracking. I love issue tracking, almost as much as I love QA. Really love QA. A lot of fun. Sitting there, tapping on your mobile app for 8 hours a day, making sure it all works. And you're going to screw up QA. You're going to push a build, and you're going to find out that it has bugs, and it's going to suck, and you're going to have to fix them, but that's all part of the process. And the real world example, again, I'm going to go back to Facebook, and apologies if I use them a few times, but I think they have a very interesting company. They have product managers for every feature. There's a guy that manages messaging. There's probably a guy that manages likes. There's probably a guy that manages comments. There's a guy that manages the news feed. You have to be the manager for your entire company. So again, that goes back to the MVP example. If you try and build this massive platform with lots of features, it's going to be very hard to manage. So I would highly recommend focusing on managing the smallest feature set you can that's going to accomplish the main goals of your product. And again, it starts with me. I really knew nothing about product management when I started WeVue. And I didn't even think I was going to be a product manager. I was like, we're going to work with these people, we're going to build this app, it's going to be awesome. And as I went along, I had to learn, what skills do I have to develop that my team lacks, and what skills do I need to go find that are going to come in and really help fill out my team. So on that note, does anyone have any comments on front end versus back end development, questions on building out a team? Come on, you guys got to liven up for me. Somebody's got to have something. All right. Build for cash or grow some grass. So basically, companies survive on money. And you guys are going to have to figure out where you're getting your money from. And in the B2C world, that's often from an investment. And that's the route that we went. And we raised some money around this concept that we had. We actually got pretty lucky. I wouldn't recommend, or recommend is probably not the right word. If you're going to raise money for a B2C company in Florida, it's going to be hard. It is not a market that is yet mature where people think you can build B2C products in Florida from an investment perspective, at least from what I've seen. But on that note too, only take an investment if you need it. So building for cash is all about how can I get some money to keep this thing going. And that way, if you can build for cash, you can own your company. I own a pretty small portion of what I built because we've had to go out and raise money to fuel the rocket ship. And that's okay, but at the same time, we've now realized, hey, we need to figure out a way that we're going to get some revenue in the door. And the problem with growing some grass is in this day and age, you got to grow some really tall grass, and you got to grow it really, really fast. You could get 100,000 downloads, and if those people aren't coming back and using your product actively, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Hey, great, you got 100,000 people to look at you, and then nothing happens. And that's one of the problems that we've found. We can go out, we're doing a lot of marketing at USF right now, and we get people to download our app. We can get them to use it one time. They love it, they enjoy it, but they don't think about it. They don't come back 2 weeks later when they're having an event and they don't set up an album. So that's been one of our biggest challenges. So now what we're looking at doing is, hey, can we go and now build for cash and focus on building products for people that are willing to pay for products, which is businesses, and then can we find top-down buy-in? So instead of getting at the consumer and trying to consistently remind them, can we get in front of managers and employees and say, hey, we've built a valuable tool that's going to improve your life, and you're going to want to use this every day. So the real world example of that, in my opinion, is if you look at the consumer companies that make consumer apps and make money, there's only like 5 or 6 of them. You have Google, which is also a B2B company. They really make their revenue on advertising. They're actually more or less an advertising company. You have Facebook, obviously. You have Twitter, which is struggling to make revenue. Snapchat's a great example. They have this insane valuation, but they've never made a dime. So it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how this bubble, as some are calling it, in the consumer market is going to play out. But Tampa's a great example of building for cash. When I moved here, I didn't know there was a tech scene, but consistently I'm finding out about new technology companies that have been here for 10, 20, 30 years even, that have built amazing businesses around solving real-world problems that apply to the business environment and really improve people's lives. I think another great example of this that I saw recently is I read an article about an app company in San Francisco that is blatantly saying, we don't want to solve problems. We want to build consumer products, and really consumer products don't solve difficult problems. What problem does Snapchat solve? Sure, your messages disappear, it's novel, but I can screenshot that. We've clearly seen that it's not a lock. That these photos are being leaked. Facebook arguably, makes it easier to communicate with your friends, but we've had the US Postal Service for a couple 150 years. I think again, it's building a consumer product is awesome, it's super exciting, it's very fun, it's what everyone kind of wants to do, but it's extremely, extremely difficult. Whereas building a B2B product, not saying it's not hard, but you can validate a lot more quickly. Just because I can get someone to download my app and use it, doesn't mean that I validate it. If I can get someone to pay me something, that means I could probably get someone else to maybe pay me something as well. Any questions there? I don't even know why I'm asking anymore. All right. One stack at a time. So what this means, if anyone here isn't very technical, is I would focus on one development stack. So whether that's an iPhone, it's iOS, building iPhone apps, building Android apps, or building for the web. If you're building Windows Phone or BlackBerry apps, you should probably leave now. Because the market's not there. So you guys need to build for the audience. And there's a couple of interesting things I think about which platform you choose. So in my opinion, the web is really the best place to build a viral product. It's the most conducive to it, it's very open, there's a lot of really interesting hacks you can do to gain traction. One of my favorite web hacks that's happened is if you look at Airbnb, and they were really kind of automatically posting their stuff to Craigslist even though they weren't supposed to. You can't really do that stuff in iOS. iOS is very much a walled garden. You're building an app that has to be self-contained. You can share outside of that. There's a new feature in iOS 8 that allows you to create extensions, which is pretty interesting because now you can add a sharing button to the iOS environment so people can share to your app. They're also doing stuff with iBeacons. So have you guys anyone's seen where you walk into it like a Publix now and you see that little app icon in the bottom corner? So that's basically a beacon is sending you a signal that's saying like, hey, if you have this app, open it or download it. But beyond that, it's really hard to get your application in front of people on iOS. And furthermore, it's almost impossible to send someone a link and target them to a specific piece of content in your app, which you can do on the web. So a great real-world example of this, hang on one second, is Instagram. So Instagram still hardly has a web presence. You can go, you can look at people's profiles, but that really didn't happen until like 2 years after they'd been successful in the consumer market. They focused on iOS, and the reason they did that, in my opinion, is iOS is great for design. If if you want to build a really well-designed, beautiful product, I would recommend starting with iOS. Android, I don't know as much about, I'll be honest. We have James over here who probably knows a little bit more than me if he has any comments. Android's interesting because you can ship. So with iOS, when you develop an app, you get it all ready, you're like, this is awesome, we're going to put it in the store, you send it to Apple, and then it's like 3 weeks later when you actually see it ready, because they have to go through the whole approval process.
If it gets approved.
If it gets approved. So we had a great example recently, we had this new feature we just built, and we were so excited about it, we're going to get it into the market, and iOS 8 comes out, and we're like, all right, we know it's going to be long, and we ship it, and then it gets rejected. And then we fix it, and then we're super excited, and we ship it again, and then it gets approved in 3.5 weeks. So that's the challenge with iOS. You don't have that challenge with Android, but there are some other challenges there. It's not as clean of an environment, in my opinion. So again, going back to Instagram, they built purely an iOS experience, focused on that, but you can do little interesting viral things with iOS. And it's mainly around putting your content on a web page that's coming out of your app. So WeVue, we crowdsource all this content, and we actually turn it into a video. So those videos exist on web pages that you can share across Facebook that then drive people back into the application. Be the voice of reason. So this is really, I think, the key to product management. It's those two words are very interesting. You have product. So on the one side, you're in charge of the vision of what that product is going to be. And on the other side, you have to manage how you're going to get there. So again, we're going back to that order and that chaos. So how do we take that vision and distill it down into something that we can actually act on? And I think the key here is you really stand as a product manager in between the three elements of a startup, which is marketing, design, and engineering. And they're not always going to get along. More often than not, they're not going to get along. And you're going to have to kind of be there to really guide those conversations. So I think one of the keys to this is, the way I like to think about product development is going out into the field. You have the sales and marketing guys, they're taking the brand and they're talking about your startup, and they're bringing what they're hearing in the market back to you. And you should be out there with them, hearing what people are saying about your product, seeing them use it, watch how they interact with it, ask them the right questions. And then from there, you have to distill all of that information, 1,000 opinions down. And then you have to talk to your engineers and your designers and figure out how you're going to turn that into something that actually works. And that's not easy. It's probably my biggest day-to-day challenge, is how I go out and see what people are saying about my product. Because you'll hear someone say one thing, and then someone else wants the exact opposite thing. And you have to really figure out what the best vision is for your company. And again, going back to Steve Jobs, he famously said consumers don't know what they want. And that's interesting in this day and age of kind of lean startup methodology, where it's like, all right, build a product, ship a product, get feedback. And a lot of people don't do that. I mean, Apple very famously does not test products in the market before they ship them. iOS 8, I'm sure they test, but they're not testing in the mass market, getting feedback and then iterating. And I think that's very interesting. Waterfall versus agile development. So waterfall is, hey, we sit down, we make a plan, this is the features, this is how long it's going to take, and then we build it, and then we release it, and then we start that process all over again. Lean startup methodology or agile development is we build something very quickly, whatever we think will validate our core concept. We release that into the marketplace, we get as much feedback as we can, and we use that feedback to then start that process all over again, but it happens a lot more quickly. The interesting thing about lean versus waterfall is kind of the use cases for them. If you think you really know what it is you're building, or if you have a customer that says, hey, I want A, B, and C, waterfall is the way to go. Say, hey, we're going to do A, B, and C, it's going to take us this long, it's going to cost this much, perfect. But if you don't know what you're building is going to be successful, or someone's not definitively going to pay you for it, it definitely behooves you to try and build something quickly, get it out there, get feedback, validate that concept, and go from there. And on that note, I do want to give you guys some resources that really help me with user testing, which is a big portion of what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to write a few of these on the board so you guys can take them down. So usertesting.com is actually one of my favorites. And basically what they let you do is you submit your app or your website and you pick some demographic info if you'd like, and then they basically have people play with your app, you get screenshots, and they kind of walk their way through it. And you can give them very specific tasks, like, hey, I want you to download my app, go through the walkthrough screens, and create an album. And they'll tell you if that was difficult, they'll tell you what they think of the design. And a fun hack for that is if you actually call them up and say you're interested in buying the enterprise version, they'll give you a couple free trials and you don't have to actually buy the enterprise version. Also, Facebook Start, if you guys are a startup, I recommend applying for their program. They actually give you some free user testing credits as well. Google Forms, or WeVue, is another great way to get feedback. That's not how you spell Google. WeVue, if you guys are unfamiliar, is a former Tampa startup. Similar to Google Forms, they just let you make survey stuff. I would recommend, if you guys are going to do surveys, incentivize them. It's pretty hard to get random strangers to fill out a questionnaire, but if you can throw out a gift card, or you can throw out some incentive to fill this thing out, you'll see a much better response. Also on that note, you can use surveys in a live setting. Gather people in a room, watch them use your product, film them using your product. You'll gain really actionable insights from doing that. And on the note of filming people using your product, there's a new tool that's out called Look Back for any mobile people out there. And basically what Look Back does, and I'll show you real quick. Give me a second here. Oh, maybe not. I'm not going to be able to show you. But anyway, Look Back, you would have your app. It's usually in a staging environment, so before you've shipped it, and you take your phone and you shake it, and camera comes up, and you press record, and it actually records your face, or whoever the tester is, their face, and their movements on the screen. And then it comes up, and you can watch both the tap and their interaction. So it's very similar to user testing, but you're actually the one doing the testing. They're a new startup, they're doing very well. The tool is awesome. If you're doing anything with mobile, I highly recommend using it. The other thing I'd recommend is interns. So it's not exactly testing, but you will gain a lot of actionable insight from young people, especially if you're building on the consumer side. And it's I say young people, I'm not very old, but working with students is probably the better word. It's an amazing experience for both parties. I mean, you get to learn so much about what they think about the world and how they're experiencing technologies. You're going to hear about technologies you've never even thought of and how they use them. And then you're ideally going to provide them with a chance to learn about building software, building a company, or whatever it is that you do. So my real world example here is, has anyone seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding? So there's a line in that that's always stuck out in my mind, and it's when the wife says, the husband is the head, but the wife is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants. And that, in my mind, is what a product manager does. Sales and marketing is the head. They handle the vision, they're all ego, they're out there, selling the brand, figuring out what's going on, and a good sales guy can sell anything. Oh yeah, I got snake oil. It's the best snake oil you've ever seen. It's going to polish your shoes and cure cancer. But then he's going to come back and be like, yo, Taylor, I just told this guy I'm curing cancer. You got 2 weeks before he's going to pay us. So part of the challenge there is setting the expectations for sales and marketing. And those expectations start with your design and engineering teams. And it's taken me personally a long time to figure out how long it takes my developers to do things. And that's something you can only really learn with time. And selling vaporware is not the worst thing in the world. I mean, Microsoft was started by selling something that didn't exist yet, and then they went out and built it. But it's a tough balance. And I think you need to make sure that you are trying to guide those conversations in the best way that you can. And really, at the end of the day, you have to be the eyes and the ears, and you have to guide your team. And I think that the term CEO is thrown out there all the time, and I'm not a big fan of it. And the only reason I am that person is because I have to legally sign things. But really in a startup, the product manager is the guy who's driving the ship. And you have to figure out where you want that ship to go and how you're going to put gas in it. So, final slide. Any questions?
You were talking about feedback earlier and getting it from multiple sources. How do you track that and then analyze it together?
So it's an interesting question. I mean, obviously there's two types of feedback. There's qualitative and quantitative. So it's feedback you hear from conversations, what people are saying, and then there's obviously data. So I'll give you guys an example of an experiment that we did that was interesting. So again, our product, it's all about, hey, you go in, you can create an album, you can invite people to that album, anyone can add that content, and then you can turn it into a movie. All right, this is cool, great. People love it when we get in front of them. But the problem is that it doesn't, like most consumer products, immediately kind of stroke your ego or give you that instant gratification. You know, the real value is after you've invited people, they've come to the album, they've added stuff. So we decided, hey, we're gonna run an experiment this summer, and we're gonna say, all right, you're gonna make a video first, and then you're gonna invite people, and they can kind of collaborate around that video. And HTC actually just released a product, I can't remember what it's called, that's doing just that now. So we decided to do a test around this, and we're like, you know what, we're gonna do both qualitative and quantitative feedback. So we're gonna push this out there, and there's some great tools for the quantitative stuff. I mean, if you're on the web, Google Analytics is where I would start. For mobile, we use Flurry, but Google Analytics, I believe, can also be used for iOS and Android. Look back is, again, you know, that's an example of kind of the quantitative, so getting those, or qualitative, getting those conversations started. So what we did is we said, you know what, we're going to release this into the market. We're going to work with our interns. We're going to try and get 50 people to go through this video creation process. And we're going to see where they stop. And if they make it all the way through and they tell us that they liked it and it worked well, and we see the data and we hear the conversations at the same time, we're going to know that we've succeeded. It didn't work. That's the way the game goes. So, you know, and again, we didn't get as many people as we wanted to test it, so we had to kind of weigh up, all right, we have this data that's showing us that people aren't getting the whole way through this process, but maybe the data is not exactly 100% what we thought it would be, you know, maybe we should keep testing this. So we go out and we have conversations, and everyone we talked to was like, no, I don't like this. So that's, you know, how you have to kind of combine those two, and it's a bit of an art form. I mean, you know, studying data is a hard thing, and it's, taking conversations and distilling them down into something actionable is hard as well. Any other questions? Push yo shit and hustle. So at the end of the day, you're working for a startup. You gotta get out there, you gotta hustle, you gotta market with your team. You gotta be your own product evangelist all the time. So what that means for me is, you know, I wear my t-shirt, I book a meeting with anyone that will talk to me that knows more than I do. I get out there as often as I can with my marketing guy to events to see how people are using the product, to talk to them about how they're using the product. You know, you really have to be your own evangelist. So on that note, I'd like you all to take out your phones. I'm not going to make you download anything, I promise. Everyone, take your phones out. I want you all to take a selfie. Everyone, we're doing it in unison too. So I want all the phones in the air. Everybody ready?
No.
All right. 1, 2, 3, say cheese. Cheese. And the final trick is of the day, I didn't take a selfie. I took a picture of you guys taking selfies. And now I'm going to tweet a photo at BarCamp that says, I got my session to take a selfie. And you guys are all going to retweet that. That's a sneaky hack. And that's what product management is all about.
But you made me take a good selfie, so I'm okay with that.
Fair enough. So, guys, with that, you know, that's my presentation. You guys can find me at Taywall on Twitter or at WeVue on Twitter. I'd appreciate it if you guys had time later today. If you have an iPhone, please download the app. You can join the BarCamp album with the code that is the hashtag. Upload that selfie, make a view. We're also, again, working on a culture app for companies. So if you guys work for a large organization and you're interested in talking about photo and video sharing, I'd love a chance to chat with you. And yeah, I mean, I'm open for questions. You guys want to talk about anything? I think we still got some time.
Well, you're only on Apple products, aren't you?
Only on Apple for now.
So what are you gonna do about those of us that are on Samsung or something else?
As soon as I can 100% validate my product and say it's worth the money to build for Android, I will.